Welcome to Ex Machina. Join us as we explore the mysteries of this world. Cryptids, monsters, macabre tales, and horror stories abound. Could they be true? Are monsters real?
Folks, and thank you for joining us on another edition of Ex Machina. In the studio tonight with me is Robbie Rip Rains, and we have special guests in the house. We got Greg House from Woodwalkers and Tim Coonbo Baker, the OG of the Bigfoot community. He's one of the ones that I personally consider probably the most knowledgeable guy in the field. If Coonbo says it, I'm going to believe it because he's been there, done that, and got the T-shirts from all across the country. So glad to have these guys joining us tonight. And, one thing I got to tell you about Tim Coonbo Baker is if there's a guy that's got some credibility in this field, it's a guy that was a scientist for NASA. So we've got a NASA scientist talking about Bigfoot, folks. If that doesn't get your wood wet, nothing will. Boys, how you guys doing tonight?
Doing good.
And doing great.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Well, it looks like we got a little better internet signal than we did last time.
Yeah.
A lot better. That's why
pretty comfortable looking chairs.
Yeah, they never did get our internet fixed, so it's going off and on, just by the second. So I said, to heck with it. I hollered at Greg yesterday or day before and said, hey, if we're going to do this, I need to come down there at your place.
We was beginning to think you lived far enough out in the country they were bringing your internet to you by Pony Express.
It's not even that good. It's what they do. It comes in by smoke signals.
I had an instructor when I was in the Army that used to say that all electronics run on smoke, and if you ever let the smoke out, it doesn't work anymore.
That's exactly correct. There's no such thing as electrons.
It's all smoke.
Yeah, what runs around inside those wires is smoke. Everything works good till you screw up and let the smoke out.
Then it don't work no more.
Exactly.
Well, Tim, for those people in the audience who aren't familiar with you, and I don't think there's many, but why don't you give us a little bit about background about yourself? I know I kind of let the cat out of the bag on the NASA thing, but tell us a little bit about what you used to do and what got you into this field and where all you've been.
Well, I'm gonna give the Reader's Digest version of it because, like I said, most folks have heard it probably 20 times, and it's real easy to find it on other podcasts. And I don't want to take up a lot of y'all's valuable time, but I first learned about Bigfoot back when I was about 2 years old, about 2.5 years old. And that's when one came up and on our farm we had, there were five families that lived on our farm at one time. And one of the families that lived right over next to my grandparents ran our sawmill. And I think thinking about, for a long time, I never knew what caused this, but we've never ever had problems like this on the farm ever, except this one incident. And the sawmill was way back over in the woods on the back of the farm. And they ran the sawmill for my dad and my grandfather. And I think they got crossways with the alpha somehow. I don't know if they might have dropped a tree right in the middle of one of their nurseries. They might have shot at him. They might have been over there running after dark or something. I don't know what they did, but I know that the boogers came up and were raising Cain, and they end up killing 6 of their 7 coon hounds. And I mean, when I'm talking about killing, I mean they tore them apart. There were dog parks over about a nearly 100-yard radius, that slung all over the place the next day. And the family packed up in the middle of the night and left, never to come back, except they would come back during the day to run the sawmill, but way before dusky dark, they'd get the heck out of there. And then I learned about them from my grandfather and my grandmother and my great grandmother. And they started seriously teaching us about them when I was about 3 years old. And to them, Bigfoot, which the word Bigfoot hadn't been invented at that point. We're talking about in the late 50s. My grandfather and my dad called them catamounts, and my grandma called them the neighbors. And my great grandma, she was, I think, half Cherokee. She called them the Nununui, which is a Cherokee word for them. And my mom called them catamounts or boogers. A lot of the local folks call them boogers. But anyway, they were just as normal as rabbits and squirrels to us. That's the way I was raised, and to my parents and grandparents and great grandparents, and the folks that lived out around there. They weren't unusual at all, and everybody knew about them. And when we would plant our garden, then we'd have to go over to the back of the farm and plant another garden for the neighbors, around the edges of the fields. It wasn't all fancy. We didn't weed it or anything like that. But we dadgum sure did go back there and plant all kind of stuff for them. My dad always made sure that we had plenty of plum trees and persimmon trees growing in the fence rows and stuff, and an occasional apple tree, every once in a while an apple tree or a pear tree or something. And that was, so they'd leave our stuff alone. Anyway, I grew up hearing them all the time at night. We didn't have air conditioning, so this time of year we slept with our windows open. We used to hear a lot of stuff. I saw my first one when I was 4, right outside my bedroom window. It scared me half to death. When I went running into my parents' bedroom screaming and yelling that there was a yellow-eyed, bloody-headed monster outside my window, they didn't question me or anything. My dad instantly jumped up, ran out with his shotgun and a flashlight, and nothing on but his slippers and his boxer shorts, looking for it. And my mom never questioned it. When my dad came back, she asked, did you see it? And Daddy says, didn't see it, but I heard it beating feet, running up towards the corner of one of our fields, and which that's still a travel route through there. Where I'm living right now is not but about 100 feet from that corner of the field, that field where that booger ran that night. And we still have them coming and going through there to this day. And anyway, I was always interested in them. I called the first time I ever attempted to call one. I successfully called one to me when I was 12 years old in 1968. In late spring of 1968, and it came fast. My dad and I were fishing out in my dad's boat, and we ended up having to crank up and get out of there. We were in a slough where the water was only about 3.5 feet deep in most of the places, and that would be like to a booger, that'd be like running through a mud puddle. So this thing was coming in hard and fast. And so my dad, we cranked up and got out of there. My dad and I had another encounter a few years later, again, bass fishing, where we were trying to retrieve a lure that was hung up next to the bank. And we were in there, and we were right underneath a big bluff, sort of. And while we were in there trying to get the lure unhung, there was a booger came right to the top of the bluff, which it wasn't very high, maybe 15, 20 feet tall, but it came right up to the edge and screamed at us. And if you've never been screamed at by one of them at close range, it's unbelievable. It actually, it's ear splitting. I mean, it shakes you to your core and actually hurts your ears at that distance. And this thing scared us half to death. And fortunately, the lure came loose about that time, and we got the heck out of Dodge again. And my dad said, later, we're over on the other side of this big backwater, and my dad says, son, you don't need to tell your mama or your sister about that. No, I won't. They'll never let us come down here again. But my dad didn't talk about them very much. He just accepted the fact that they were there. But anyway, fast forward to several years, and we're talking about the mid '70s, and by this time, the the Patterson Gimlin film had come out, and Natural Geographic had some stuff about the Yeti, and so we sort of knew what we were dealing with then. We knew what they were, and anyway, mid '70s, I was in college, and me and my buddy Jim Hart, who he's passed away now, but his screen name used to be, or field name was Bubba Gump. But Bubba and I got to watching them pretty close out on our farm, and then looking for them in other places as well. And I met some other folks that were interested in them, and I took my first written report, sighting report on one in 1978. And not long after that, I took my second one. And the interesting thing was, I had those written up as Bigfoot sightings. In 1984, I kept hearing about these other things. People were describing something else that wasn't what I had seen out on the farm. And I thought, well, maybe they just didn't see it good. So I kept writing them up as Bigfoot. But the descriptions of this other creature were pretty consistent. And so I began to wonder if there wasn't something else out there besides just Bigfoot. And in 1984, we were working on the very first Department of Defense mission for the space shuttle. And we were building a bunch of electronics down in South Alabama at a little bitty town outside of Troy, Alabama. And there was a contractor down there. And so myself and another person were sitting down there to oversee all that. And this was all, everything about it was top secret. And had a couple of the ladies that worked there on the project came to work one morning, and they were all upset. And long story short, I finally was able to talk to them enough to get out of them that they had seen what they described as a werewolf. And I had heard that description before, and I'm thinking again that, I don't know about this, but I talked them into showing me, taking me after work. We were both had to drive the same highway in the mornings and in the evenings. And so we went out there after work that afternoon, and they showed me where they'd had their encounter that morning on the way to work. And I found about 4 faint tracks, but 3 good tracks they were absolutely, canine looking with clawed toes, but absolutely enormous. I determined from talking to the ladies and doing some I had a dadgum one of those old white paper plates stapled to a stick of bamboo, and I was holding it up, and it was standing right beside a road sign, a curved sign in the road, and determined that this creature that they'd seen was about 9 feet tall. And I it was a like I said, basically like a big werewolf. And that's when I learned that there were dogmen. What's going on?
We're frozen. Our picture's froze up.
It is? No, am I?
Yeah, but for us to see it ain't. Hang on
Oh,
one
okay.
second.
On YouTube and on our end, it's froze up. I mean, the audio is great, but your video is froze. Not sure why.
I don't know. I hadn't had that happen before.
Hey, DA,
you were taking Dogman accounts 20 years before anybody even heard the word Dogman?
Right, exactly. First Dogman, the first 2 sighting reports I ever took in 1978. One of them in September of '78, and another one in October of '78. Turned out to both be Dogman sightings. We still not coming through?
We're not moving on YouTube, but they can still hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, we can still hear you just fine. You might go into your video settings and lower the resolution. That should help.
Okay.
You just keep talking. I'll play with this.
All right. My senior tech here is going to work on it. If he can't fix it, we'll get the real expert over here. We'll get Abby and his daughter, and she'll straighten it out.
You keep talking to him. We're gonna get her over.
Anyway, so before that time, even I had figured out that they were using infrasound, and I'm adopting this little girl. She's my adopted granddaughter. And,
there you go.
And anyway, I started doing experiments with infrasound back in the starting in 1982, and so I was the first one that figured out that Bigfoot used infrasound, and I actually was building my own infrasound microphones and was using all kind of spectrum analysis and low frequency recording equipment to record stuff that we couldn't even hear, but I could play it back to a spectrum analyzer and I could see it even though I couldn't hear it. And anyway, I was doing a lot of research with that. Like I said, started in 1981, but the first time I successfully recorded it was in 1982. And anyway, so I was the one that started all the infrasound, Bigfoot infrasound stuff. And by this time, I had figured out that there were two types of Bigfoot. There was a type 1, which is the patty type, and then there's the type 2, which we call the swamp ape type, or a lot of times we refer to it as the Neanderthal-looking type. And they're smaller, and and not quite as heavily built, but they're more widespread. And then I had taken enough reports and stuff that started noticing a difference in the personality of them. But anyway, I've been researching them. I've been researching them very seriously since 1975, and we've had a lot of firsts, and it wasn't all just me. It was I've had some really good guys working with me, and like my buddy Jim Hart and my buddy Troy Allen and Greg here, and buddy Jack Oberkirch and Jimmy Osmer and just Dan and Ricky, and just quite a few other folks, and old Mike Stuckey, who Mike's passed away, and old ABRF guy, McLean. Mike McLean. I was, Bill White, Tal Branco and I became good friends and swapped a lot of information back and forth. And at one time, Tal and I were the two most widely traveled Bigfoot researchers in the world before the Not Finding Bigfoot guys, started, traveling all over the place. But I've researched in 43 out of 50 states and at least 11 foreign countries. But I've been doing this for a long time, and I guess as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I got to say about that.
Miss Naoma had a question for you. She said, "Do you find that tails and digitigrade feet go hand in hand, and those with plantigrade feet and not tails go hand in hand?"
I have not found that. The one Dogman that I've seen with my own eyes, I couldn't tell you if my life depended on it, I couldn't tell you if it had a tail or not. I was not looking at his tail. The ladies that saw it, up close, really, really, really close on the way to work one morning. They couldn't tell me if it had a tail. The family that I took my first report from, when I went back and I went back and hunted down the people that I had talked to previous to 1984 that had given me reports that I thought, might have been actually Dogman reports. And I was able to hunt down a few of them. None of them could tell me if it had a tail or not. And but what was funny, that first family, I went back and I had the first time there was three members of the family that saw this thing, and I got to talk to the older brother, the younger brother, and the mother. Well, I couldn't talk to the younger brother then; he was in college, and but I got to talk to the older brother and the mother, and they're like, "Well, we tried to tell you, and you wouldn't listen to us." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry. I didn't know these things existed. I never heard of them before." But that's something I say a lot, that any researcher that's worth a flip at all, is worth his salt, has got to be willing to go back and relook at his data and change his mind or change his theories according to the latest information and latest data.
Totally agree.
Is our video working now?
No, we're still
okay.
Trying to figure it out.
Have you figured out how to change the resolution?
Have you determined whether or not Dogman use infrasound?
I have not for sure. The only known Dogman recordings I've been able to lay my hands on were all recorded in MP3 rather than RAW or there's only two formats that you can record on normal recording equipment that will go below 35 hertz. One of them is RAW, and the other one is WAVE. And
you got video movement. Awesome.
Oh, we do?
Yep, your video's moving now.
Abby.
I see you and Abby.
We're working.
Abby, yeah, sit down there and give them away since you fixed it.
Yeah.
I fixed it.
Thank you, Abby. You're
an expert. She's gonna have to be raised up to senior technician.
Or expert technician.
Expert.
I don't know what you're paying her, but it's not enough.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, well, Greg, you're gonna have to ooch over here. We ain't gonna be gnawing on each other's ears or whatever. But
no, you
here. Let me back up a little bit.
Like say me fine.
There we go.
I don't want to over ugly that thing.
Make Greg hold on to your.
Well, that may be right.
Hold on to your pocket.
Do what?
Make Greg hold on to your pocket like the inmates do.
No.
But anyway, I have not been able to answer. I have seen one really, really good full body shot of a Dogman, looking at it from the right side, and on that, I couldn't tell, or I didn't notice, or I never got to hold the thing. The guy wouldn't even let us hold it, and he wouldn't let us, get a copy of the negative or go to the Walmart and print off a few more. He wouldn't do anything to help us, and so we only got to look at it briefly while he was holding it in his hands, and I didn't see. I didn't see a tail. Let's just say that. So that's one of the big mysteries to me is, do they have a tail or not?
The one I saw in LBL, I honestly don't recall if I saw the tail. I know it had a digitigrade feet because of the way it ran, but I don't know if it just wasn't concentrating on it or if I didn't notice that detail. But
right,
that whole moment, that 10 to 15 seconds when I actually saw the thing is just, it's like a heartbeat. I mean, I can play it over and over in my head, but it's like, I felt like I was moving in slow motion trying to react to it.
Well, if it's some variety of a lupine, wolves their tails don't stick out unless they're running wide open, like, chasing a caribou or something, or a deer. And, the rest of the time when they're just moving around slowly, their tail hangs down, just like a lot of German Shepherds. Their tails hang down, and they don't have it up where you can see it very well. My Novinger, Missouri reports, I have. Let's see, those were in. There was a series of them over a period of a couple of 3 years, and those were around. They were all from about 2010 to about 2019. Well, yeah, off and on. People that lived out in that area, I took the reports all in the last part of the 20 teens. From about 17 to about 19. Maybe early 2020, but a lot of the reports that I took had happened. Some of them had happened in previous years, but I got reports from the Novinger area all the way up to I can't remember the name of that management area that's way out north and maybe a tiny bit east of Novinger. But north and a tiny bit west, like maybe Union Ridge or Union Hill management area, and I can't remember the name of that little bitty community up there. I can remember the names of some of the folks that lived up there, but I can't recall the names of the name of the little community where there'd been several sightings. But and I don't want to give out the names of the people on the air, but if I had Greg, pull up Google Maps and
I can do it,
and go to Novinger, Missouri, Novinger.
Do you think Bigfoot and Dogman spend as much time on all fours as they do upright?
I don't believe Bigfoot do, and I have never. Most of the Dogman reports I get, they're bipedal, and I have heard very few. All right, let me zoom in there. Hang on, I'll tell you where. All right, I've taken a number of sighting reports up around Shibley's Point. So, whoever was asking about the Novinger area, I've taken a number of reports up and down the Sheridan River, and from Shibley's Point, that area up in there, and that big. Let me see here. How do I turn off the? How do I turn on the map view rather than satellite view on this phone?
Well, let me see.
There we go. Yeah, it was hidden behind there. Here you go. Just do it right there. There we go. There we go. There we go.
The bottom there.
Yeah, bottom. Oh, I can do that right there.
There you go.
All right, here we go. Let me slide. I can slide. Well, look at there, honey hush. I've taken some sighting reports up in Rebels Cove conservation area, and I've taken some out around Thousand Hills State Park, and my property up there where I lived bordered Thousand Hills State Park, and I actually had one on my deck one night, and then a couple of times we've had them down in the. There was a creek ran back behind my house that dumped into Forest Lake, or the lake there at Thousand Hills State Park, and we've heard them chattering back and forth down there along that creek before.
When you said chattering, is that like
the
the samurai chatter?
The samurai talk, or what I used to before people started calling the samurai talk. I'd tell people it sounded like the Tasmanian Warner Brothers Tasmanian Devil, that what it sounded like when him or the Tasmanian Devil or like when our friend Troy Allen was eating supper, and
As Cam Buckner says, they're talking Ghibli.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, we've I've taken a lot of reports, not a whole lot, but it would go in cycles. The Sheraton River that goes from up in Iowa down and dumps out into the Missouri River. It runs almost perfectly north and south. It's a seasonal travel route through that area there around between Novinger and Kirksville and on down past Elmer and Ethel, Missouri. Anyway, so anybody else? Yeah.
What do you think of the encounter stories that people refer to as a gugway?
I don't know. I'm still trying to learn about
what they described.
Do what now?
I've taken some firsthand accounts.
Well, I've lost you. Could you?
That's what they described. Bigfoot, but it had a snout.
So,
said
could you back up? I didn't hear any of that.
He said he'd heard people talking about the Gugway, and he took some first-hand accounts where people saw a Bigfoot with a snout on it, like they'd call a Gugway. What do you think about that?
That's what I call a Type 3. That's it's got the body, pretty much the body of a normal Bigfoot. It's got plantigrade feet, but it's got like a baboon head or a snouted face. And you can look up the Beast of Seven Shoots, and that's a Type 3.
That's what show I did with Jessica the other night was about that one.
Now, one thing about them, the Type 1s and Type 2s, the patty types and the swamp ape types, don't want anything to do with it. When those Type 3s or what some people call Gugways, when they start moving to an area, the native Bigfoot in that area, they're gone. They leave, and these Type 3s, other than a couple of places in Oklahoma and Texas that I know about, the rest of them that I know about, they're mobile. They're like nomads. There'll be a fairly large group of them. I mean, their family units generally run bigger than what I have observed most of normal Type 1 and Type 2 Bigfoot. These Type 3s have a larger group, but they'll come into an area, they'll run the native Bigfoot out of the area, and they'll be in an area for 2 or 3 years and then move on. And then what's funny is they're not gone very long, and the native ones, Bigfoot, the Type 1s and Type 2s, come back into that area. And I have observed that in a couple of places in Iowa, and a place that a very good friend of ours lives in Missouri, and also a place in Oklahoma, and I've heard about it in a couple of places in Texas. But they're as far as, and we're counting Dogmen and Type 1s, Type 2s, and Type 3 Bigfoot, which those 3 types all have plantigrade feet. That's the common thing. But they are the least common. There's a whole lot less of them than there are Dogmen. That I'm from all the research I've done, and I've spent a lot of time studying the populations of Bigfoot. And just for anybody want to know, the official number, using very, very conservative estimates, officially we've got when I say officially, what I think, according to my numbers and my research that I've been doing I did over a period of about 30 years, using the same methods that the Forest Service and Audubon Society use to keep a count on rare animals and rare birds. There are at least 65,000 Bigfoot in the lower 48, in the United States. That includes Alaska. And you might as well say Hawaii too, even though I've never taken a credible sighting report from Hawaii. I haven't been able to really get out there and check it out. But I have heard some sighting reports from Hawaii. But anyway, lost my train of thought.
Talking about the population.
Oh, I believe though that the actual population is probably over 100,000. It's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 120,000, maybe 110,000.
And Robbie and I have a theory I wanted to bounce off you. You being one of the old timers in the field, you've done more research than just about anybody. Robbie and I have been kind of putting together this theory that what a lot of folks are calling wood knocks are done with their tongue. Not all of them, we're saying, but some of the noise is done with their tongue. And we think, our theory is that might be a form of echolocation, and that these things are largely subterranean.
I have encountered one in a cave, and it was way back in a cave. And that was not a fun encounter.
I'd love to hear that encounter.
Do what?
I'd love to hear that encounter.
Well, we were in a pretty well-known cave, and there was an area in there where there was a back in the cave, past a half a mile back in there. There was an area where there'd been a cave in the past, and people had walked past that thing thousands and thousands of times. And we were in there doing a survey. I used to be part of the cave survey team with the National Speleological Society. We were in there doing a survey, and I actually wasn't in there at the exact time this was discovered, but one of the guys in the survey crew was up at the top of this cave-in, this big rock pile, and noticed a crack going through into another room over there on the wall of the cave behind where the cave-in had been. So we went back in there, three of us, going to try to break through into that other room. Going up there and shining through, there was about a 6-inch crack wide, a 6-inch tall by probably 6 foot wide crack that we could see through. And shining through there, it was a very large room on the other side. So we were going to go in there and break our way through. You know, we had rock picks and stuff like that. And what we did is we took turns, one guy with a pick and the other two of us, one on us on either side of him, of that person, dragging the rock and stuff out of the way as he broke it loose. Plus, we're the ones that we had carbide lights on, plus we had taken a couple of other lights with us that shined in there. And we were making good progress, and probably within another hour, we would have had a hole broken through enough that we could have skinnied through into that big room. And there was a guy in the middle with the pick. I was on his left, and another fellow was on his right. And my lights were shining to my right. The other guy's lights on the other side was shining to his left. And then the guy in the middle, of course, was working with the pick. And we were, with our free hand, with our hands, we were raking the rock and stuff out of the way as he broke it loose. All of a sudden, the guy over there on the right, and now his light was shining to the left, past me out into this room. He starts making this, noise. And I thought, well, what's wrong with him? And I turned my head to the left, and what I see is a pair of 20-inch plus feet, big hairy feet, and about probably 18 inches of shin, lower leg, walking over there, coming towards where we were. And the next thing I remember, we were down off of the rock pile and trying to figure out which way do we go, where do we want to go? You know, you know, and we decided, we knew that close to us there was an area that had such small little passages that it couldn't get to us in there. We knew that for sure, but it could outlast us. It could sit there and just wait and wait and wait on us, or have his family sitting there waiting on us, you know, and there's no way we'd escape. So we decided, even it was a lot longer way and the passages were all big, both of them were big enough that it could follow us, that we would make a break trying to get out of the cave. And that's what we did. And I can tell you this, that little excavation project has never been finished to this day. Nobody has ever gotten into that room. But
where was that at?
It was in the state of Alabama. That's all I can say. I will say it was in North Alabama. And North Alabama has the highest concentration of caves of any part of the United States. That's why the headquarters of the National Speleological Society is or it used to be in Huntsville. I don't know if it's still there or not. I haven't been active with them in several decades. But
Missouri's a heavily caved state as well.
Right.
And I used to be an amateur spelunker. I went in a lot of caves here in Missouri.
Yeah.
And there was one here that was owned by a family called the Smittle family. And when I was in high school, we went out and we met them. We were wanting to go into the cave on their land, but they were embroiled in a legal battle with the state of Missouri over supposedly, endangered bats that lived in this cave.
We got that problem.
Well, they state of Missouri took their land in court. But if you look at the Missouri Department of Conservation website, it's got a kissed and made up story that they put on the site about Smittle Cave, that the land was donated by the family. And I know that's BS. The family fought hard to keep their land. But I'll just show you the picture. This is what they did to quote unquote protect the bats. I'm not entirely certain what kind of bats are in this cave, but if you need that to keep bats out,
no, that's wow.
That's a person down at the bottom for scale.
I see that. Yeah. Well, we have a cave like that on our farm. We have mapped over 3 miles of passages, and based on the experience of the head guy, the head honcho that was running the survey crew, he says we've just scratched the surface and we've already mapped over 3 miles. And this is the cave that the main entrance is on our farm. We found a couple of other alternate entrances that are down through vertical pits, but those are also on our farm. But there is, because I've been in there enough times and stuff, that we do have it is a maternity cave for one of the endangered bats. I don't remember if it's the gray bat or the little brown bat or whatever, but it absolutely positively is a maternity cave for this endangered bat. And then the problem is that the bats have caught this fungus called white nose or something like that. And it's a fungus that grows on their noses and causes them to die. They come out to our farm and they set up a bunch of electronics and stuff there at the entrance of the cave, and they digitally count them as they're coming and going. And they also set these really super fine little nets, and they'll catch a few and do all kind of tests on them to see how healthy they are. But I've been out there with the guy several times and watched him do it. Plus, I've seen the cave. It's a maternity cave, so it's even more important. But I've been down in the cave and seen the bats, hanging on the ceiling many times. The trouble we were having is that we had kids that were coming in there with Roman candles and skyrockets and stuff like that, shooting at the bats, killing the bats with fireworks. So they talked my dad into putting a fence around the cave, the entrance of the cave, and I could show you pictures of what it looks like. Interesting thing, they put a 8-foot super heavy duty chain link fence around the entrance of the cave, and put some barbed wire around the top, and just in case, And they put and it just had a regular gate. And they asked my dad to go over there and put this big padlock on the gate. So Dad said, "Okay, I'll go over there tomorrow and do it." And the fence crew got finished one afternoon, and the conservation department had left this big lock there with my dad, and asked him to go over the next morning and put the lock on the gate. So my dad went over there, and something had grabbed a hold of the bottom of the fence and yanked it up, and the wire was all wadded up, and some of the posts were pulled up out of the ground. So this is back in the days when they still had Polaroid cameras. My dad took a couple of pictures and rode into the USDA office there at the courthouse and gave them pictures. He said, "Hey, apparently we blocked something in the cave, and they wanted out." And so they sent the crew back. They pulled up all the fence, all the posts. They drilled holes, and they set all the posts in concrete. They dug a trench about 1.5 feet, 2 feet deep, and came in with a much taller fencing this time, and embedded the bottom 18 inches, 2 feet of the fence in concrete at the base. And then they put kickers on the top, those little angled things that you see around military bases. And they put 5 strands of gaucho wire around the tops on those little kickers. Okay, so they got done. My dad puts the lock on the gate. Next morning, he goes over there just to check it out. This time, the fence has been, it looks like an F-350 pickup truck fell out of the sky and landed on the top rail of the fence. It had a big heavy pipe along the top and bent it down. And back then I was a porker. I weighed about 330, 340 pounds. And I had a friend of mine that weighed about the same as me, maybe a little bit more. So the two of us went over there and we got on another section of the fence, and we jumped up, and the two of us grabbed a hold of that top thing, and both of us pulling at the same time, and bouncing and jerking and stuff. We couldn't budge it. So something that weighed a whole lot more than 700 pounds just came up there and grabbed that thing and just snatched it down. And so they fixed all of that. And it wasn't very long that after that suddenly a big tree was pushed down on it. And finally they said, "To heck with it, just forget it. We're not wasting any more money on it." So that's the way it sits to this day. And but there's people don't go in and out of there. It's against the law to go through the fence. But and we watch it very closely.
Metal cave. It's set in concrete, and they're steel bars this big. And
yeah.
I've been down there. You can't get a vehicle down there. There's no way somebody could yank that out with a vehicle.
Right. Yeah.
And there are other caves in that area that don't have that.
Same here. I know of 3 other caves on our farm, and all 3 of them you can get into them.
My thing is, if all they were trying to do was keep people out of Smiddle Cave, that is overkill for just keeping people out.
Yeah. Well, I guarantee you something like that, Booger go over that like it's nothing. It's easier than easier than a 10-year-old crawling into the bunk, but crawling up the ladder and into some bunk beds.
That's a boogery area, and there's a lot of sightings down around. That's near Grove Springs, Missouri.
Yeah.
And the cave is not easy to find by any means. If you don't know where it's at, you're not going to find it.
Well, I would say probably what's going on is the boogers come and go out of there, but it keeps people from coming and going out of there.
I know within walking distance of that cave are 2 other very large caves, but the difference is we don't know how far back Smiddle Cave goes. It goes back for miles. The other 2, they don't go back more than about 50, 60 yards.
Right. I can't remember the cave there where we saw the one in the cave. I can't remember. That cave has a minimum of 3 miles mapped in it. I'm thinking it may be one that's got somewhere around 15 miles mapped in it. I can't remember. There's 2 caves there fairly close together, and this one's got 3 miles mapped, one's got 15 miles mapped. I don't remember which one it was that we saw the booger in the back of it, but I know that they're my buddies, research buddies, Nate Bolin and Jack Oberkirch live out south of Huntsville, and there's an area there that's it's a whole bunch of sinkholes and a bunch of caves, and there's been boogers seen coming and going out of those caves many, many, many times. And I know I wasn't able to go that time, but back when my boy was in Boy Scouts, we had an outing down there, and I was off somewhere and I didn't get to go. But there's an overlook where you could go up and you can look down in this area where all these caves are, and they were sitting up there looking. I don't know if my son was old enough to be with that group then or not. I can't remember. But there's an old overlook there that looks down in there. They were up there on the overlook, and here comes a booger just walking through there, big as day, about 10 o'clock in the morning. And of course, that ended the cave outing. So I know that, interesting thing, the Choctaw Indian word for Bigfoot is Nalusophilia. And if you do some study of the Nalusophilia, it lives underground. And
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and one of the scary things about the Nalusophilia that a couple of my Choctaw friends have told me is that it'll hide underground. It'll hide just under the surface of the ground, and when somebody comes walking by, it'll reach up and grab them by the leg or grab them by the heel. And that'd be the end of me if that happened.
Yeah, probably me as well. I don't know that I'd be out running much anything like that.
Right. Of course, he'd have to, if I ever got loose, he'd have to run through a whole bunch of manure to get to me.
Yeah, that's what we call a brown pants moment. It would definitely be a brown pants moment.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know exactly what you're talking about.
What is I know you've been in some interesting situations, but what's the most terrifying experience you've ever had while out hunting boogers?
Been a few. The first time I was up really close to one as an adult, that was terrifying. We'd been having some calves go missing off the back of the farm. And there's an old road bed that comes through there. It used to be a public road. And we had tried to block it off numbers of times, and people would cut the fence down or knock down stuff. And we'd cut a bunch of trees and fan them across there, and they'd come in there and, drag them out of the way. And so that's what we thought was going on, was that people were getting onto the back of the farm and stealing our cattle. And so what I got to doing was, this was in the late 80s, and is I'd come in and I'd after work and I'd eat eat supper, and I had a big old Doberman pincher then. He was a good old boy, but I'm telling you what, if you put him on something, God help what you put him on. And I'd take my old Doberman and my rifle, and back then the all I had was I didn't have but two large large heavy caliber rifles. One of them was a lever action 308, and it only held 5 rounds. But I had an old Lee Enfield Army rifle, 303 British, and it would hold 11 rounds. And those things, I could run it faster than my grandfather had rigged it up and sort of sporterized it and left it for me when I was a kid. I had killed my first several deer with it. And I was very proficient with that thing. So that's what I took. And I could run that thing faster than I could run that lever action 308. And so me and my dog went back over there, and there was a place where that old roadbed came out onto our farm. There was an old gate there, and we would hide in the brush next to that gate, just sit there and listen and watch. And I've been doing that 2 or 3 nights a week for over a month. And one night, it wasn't quite a full moon, and so the moon was already up when it got dark, but it was real bright and clear. And so I didn't take a flashlight with me, and because I could see good. I've always had really good night vision, and I could see plenty good. Plus, my dog could see even better than me. So we went back over there, and it's way over on the back of the farm. And sat there till about 1 o'clock, 1:30, somewhere around that in the morning, and then went to walk back to the house. And from there, it's good 3/4 of a mile or so, maybe a little bit more, back to the house. It's probably about 7/8 of a mile. And so we're walking along, and we get to a place that's about halfway. We call it the Bee Ridge because we used to have a bunch of beehives up there. We're walking along down the Bee Ridge, and I'm walking along the wood line, and I start getting this creepy feeling that we're being watched. And the feeling went from just being creepy to being that we were in danger. And I heard my dog whine, and I looked over there at him, and he was trotting along beside me in the heel position to my left. And he had his, of course, he didn't have much of a tail, just a stump. That little stump was just tucked down as tight as it go, and he had his ears laid down, and he was walking like he'd been whooped or fussed at. And he had his head down, and he kept looking back to his left. And well, that was the feeling I was getting, was that something was pacing us right over there in the edge of the woods to our left, and a little behind us. And I had my rifle slung. I took my rifle off my shoulder and got it down in position, in front of me, and I flipped the safety off. And when I flipped that safety off, and in a 303, it's a big knob. You got to push it up and over, sort of. And it's a very quiet safety. It doesn't make much noise at all, but it made just a little noise. And at that instant, about 25 to 30 yards behind us, right in the edge of the woods, this thing screamed at us, and it was so loud it hurt our ears and shook me through to the core. And I couldn't help it. I instantly busted to my right and took off running wide open out to the south, out into this pasture. And the field up there was a pasture at that time. And I slammed on the brakes. I realized after running about 50 yards or so, oh my God, the last thing you want to do is be running from a predator. And so I slammed on the brakes and spun around with my rifle up, and my dog goes past me. That's what adrenaline. I was staying ahead of a Doberman Pinscher. I was running so fast. And when I slammed on the brakes and spun around, he came flying past me, and I stood there shaking like a dog pooping peach pits, and with my rifle pointed at the woods. It never came out and exposed itself, but it was stomping around in the edge of right inside the tree line and grabbing trees and shaking them and snapping stuff and screaming and huffing, making all this racket. And I just started slowly backing out across the field and towards home. And when I got over a little, the peak of the ridge where I couldn't see those treetops being ripped back and forth, I turned around and I'd run about 30, 40 yards. I'd spin around with a rifle up. Then I'd turn, I'd run some more. I'd spin around. And I got home that way. And I got there to the house, and my old dog was there at the back door, bouncing at the back door, wanting in. And I got my keys out, and I was so shook up, I had to hold the keys with both hands to get it in the keyhole and unlock the door. So I got in there, and I was scared to turn on all the lights, and I just as fast as we could, I got in the bed, and I went to sleep there. I had my rifle on one side and the shotgun loaded up, double-aught buck on the other side of me, and my dog normally he slept on the floor. He slept right on the foot of the bed that night. The next night, the first incident happened on a Thursday night. The next night was a Friday night, and I had a date. And I got in about 1 o'clock and came in. I was getting ready for bed and everything. And I came out of the bathroom and walking into the bedroom, and my dog was standing there. You know how dogs, when they're on full alert, they'll get stiff-legged. They'll have their legs just real stiff and spread apart. And he had his head down and all of his hackles standing up. And this is the first time I'd ever seen him do this. And he was growling, this low growl. He was looking towards the front porch. The windows on the south side of my bedroom looked out on the front porch. And he's standing there staring at this. And by this time, the moon is over, pretty good. And there was some light sort of reflecting up there on the porch. And I saw a big shadow go across the corner of the window, the west corner of the window. And the dog starts turning to the west, and a big shadow went across the window, the west window of the bedroom. And I'm standing right in the doorway between that bedroom and the back bedroom. And it also has windows that look to the west. And that same big shadow went across that window. And it didn't go across. I couldn't tell if it went across the back windows. And I was scared to look out. I was too scared to look out the window. And eventually, curiosity got the best of me. So my rifle was handy. I got my rifle, and I walked into the bathroom, and the bathroom window looked out into the backyard to the north. And I used the barrel of my rifle to raise up one of the slats of the Venetian blind. And we have a yard light out there, what we call a booger light in the yard, and it shines real good through that backyard. And I'm looking around out there, don't see anything. And I'm sure it just stepped across the fence there on the north side of the yard. But I never did see anything. But those 2 nights were pretty hairy. The other thing that we found a place that we called AP Road. It's where we'd had a number of sightings and encounters in the past. And it was just right off the Natchez Trace. And we noticed this just a field road that paralleled the Trace property. And we had that ran along parallel to the Trace border. And we kept trying to figure out how to get down there. And I had a buddy named Sammy Armstrong, and Sammy was a retired trucker, And man, he had a bunch of good maps. And he finally figured out how to get in there to where we could get on that field road. And it required a lot of driving around in weird areas and stuff. And we got in there. And sure enough, we came up on the trace and we turned down that road. And as we were going down the hill out into a bottom, there to our right, as we were going down the hill, were open pines on the trace property. And there was a slope going up there in those open pines. And up on the top, there was an overlook and a picnic area up there. On the left was cut over pines that probably were 6 or 7 or 8 years old. They were up probably 12 feet tall, 12, 14 feet tall, and just an almost impenetrable mass of sawbriars and saplings and just brush. And about halfway down the hill, there was a clump of wild cherry trees that sort of grew out into that gravel road a bit. As we passed that, we got what we call the bionic bird scream. It sounds like a screech owl, but at about 140 decibels. And we had the windows down, and it was so loud it hurt mine and Sandy's ears, and it came out of those cherry trees right just as we passed them. Now, this is broad daylight. This is probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we went on down. I didn't slow down or anything. Went on down to the bottom, and we were going to try to follow that road bed further once we got to the bottom of the hill, but the ground was too soupy, too juicy, and I almost got stuck. I had to put it in 4-wheel drive and back up, and I turned around. Well, we could hear the boogers were up there in those cut over pines fussing and raising Cain. So we stepped out of the truck. I turned the engine off, and we got out. And both of us had 12-gauge riot guns loaded up with buckshot and slugs. We got out with those. And normally when you get out with a gun, they shut up and will back away. This seemed to incense these. It made them matter. And about the time we got around to the front of the truck, they charged us down through that cutover. And a human being couldn't have crawled through there without tearing their flesh off their bones and ripping their clothes completely off of them. And these things came through. There were 3 of them, and they came through that cutover like runaway bulldozers on crack cocaine or something. And they burst out of the cutover right in front of us. And this is the first time I had ever been accosted by one in broad daylight, and Sammy too. And they were screaming and yelling, and we were backed all the way up against the brush guard on the front of my truck. And we real fast, both of us jacked rounds in the chamber, and we had our safeties off and our fingers on the trigger, and we had the shotguns up pointing at them. And they came about 10 feet outside into the open, and then just stopped. And
Your wife looking up.
Thank you.
Look at that. I'm telling you, his wife taking care of him. She come over here and hand him a pack of M&Ms. We're gonna have to have an intermission for just 1 second. Abby and Wanda's fixing to leave. I'm gonna walk them out, but Abby's got to give you some hugs before she gets going.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let us have an intermission here for a second.
Hang on 1 second.
All right.
I'll finish the story. Whoop.
All right.
And I get internet service out there, so I'm going back and forth.
Go where you got to get up.
Hey, folks, since it's
Good to see you again.
about Callawag Tactical, and I'm going to take a quick break, run a hall. I will be right back. Robbie, you want to tell us a bit about Callawag?
Wait, we're going to be very, very careful.
Yes.
Very careful.
Yeah.
Bobby, you're muted.
Sorry, I was having to mute it because Bucky was in there barking. While they take a little intermission,
Right,
DA stepped across the road, across the hall, not the road. Scallywag Tactical, one of our affiliates, is a veteran military, or a veteran-owned company that we feel really highly about. If you've read the books, you've seen or read the knives in the books. This is the Dugan. We've got stuff like the Dew Claw. They've got any kind of blade that you're going to want to use or put in your go bag or just put in your tackle box or put in your pocket. Go check them out at Scallywag Tactical. Use code DA Roberts 10 at checkout. It gives yourself an extra 10% off of your purchase, and that goes for the blemish blade section. You've heard me say it many, many times before. Most of the time, the blemish blades there's nothing wrong with them. You got a box that's maybe dinged up. DA's found one of his knives that he's gotten that had a small minor scratch on it. I haven't found anything wrong with any of the knives that I've gotten. So go check them out. Code DA Roberts 10 at checkout. Tell them we sent you. And perfect timing. There you are.
Heck yeah.
Greg will be back here in a minute. I'll finish
nope.
the story.
Alrighty.
So we're standing there, and literally, I didn't know if we were going to make it through that or not. They stood there screaming at us, and we stood there just backed up against the brush guard of my truck, and with our shotguns pointed at them. The bad thing was that we knew that we would be lucky to stop one of them. And what we were doing, we said, well, if they start at us, we're going to shoot the one in front because it appeared to be the alpha. And maybe if we hit it twice, we might slow it down. But then we were going to start working. I was going to work on the one I was on the driver's side of the brush guard. Sammy was on the passenger side. So from our point of view, I was going to work on the one on the left, and Sammy was going to work on the one on the right. And they stood there and screamed at us numbers of times, and I cannot tell you how many. And I can't tell you if the whole encounter lasted 30 seconds or if it lasted 30 days. I think it probably realistically lasted less than a minute. I would say it probably did last 20 to 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds, something like that. But they screamed at us quite a few times, and it wasn't just the alpha. Sometimes, sometimes all three of them would scream together, and other times it'd be like one would scream, then another one, then another one. It would just, there was no rhythm to it that could tell. We kept our shotguns up and pointed at them. Like I said, we had our safeties off and our fingers on the trigger. And thank goodness Sammy was an old Vietnam War vet. And at that point in my life, I'd been in a number of shooting situations on other things. And anyway, neither one of us flinched. And finally, after screaming at us probably 6 or 7, 8 times each, something like that, they just stopped. And they just sat there and looked at us. And what was interesting was, especially the alpha, he was looking at us in disgust, like he wanted a confrontation or something. I mean, he was looking at us like, y'all ain't even worth my time. Bunch of wimps. Or he was. I mean, I got the distinct feeling that he was looking at us in disgust, and he just sort of turned. He started turning away, and as he started turning, he sort of looked. Well, let me see if I can turn this way. He's turning away, and he sort of looked back at us like, almost made a face at us or something. Not really, but he scowled at us as he turned away. He sort of, as he was turning away, he looked back towards us and sort of scowled at us. And then,
how big was he?
These were type 2s. So he was probably 8.5 feet tall, something like that. And he wasn't super heavy built. I'd say he probably weighed, maybe 600 to 700 pounds, something like that. The other two were slightly shorter, maybe 8 foot, something like that, 8'2", something. And they were just as buff as he was not. He was very, very barrel chested. The type 2s are, a lot of times the type 1s you see, the panty types, the males have a V-shaped body. I mean, they got huge broad shoulders and more narrow hips. I mean, their hips are still wide, but they're definitely a V shape to them. It's like a body. They're built like a bodybuilder, sort of. The type 2s are not that way. They're more barrel chested, but they're still very thick front to back. And they're still massive, but not like a type 1. But they after the big one turned around, and he walked, and he sort of pushed one of them aside a little bit, and they stood there and looked at us for a few seconds, and then they turned around and followed him into the bush. Now, going through that stuff, you could really hear him crunching stuff, but one of the things that amazed me about it is they didn't have to go very far at all, and they just disappeared in there, just vanished. But you could tell because the amount of noise that we heard that they were fairly close in there. They were still there. They were just sitting there watching us. So one of us suggested that it was time to get the heck out of Dodge, and the other one certainly didn't argue. So we jumped the truck. We fired the truck up. The truck was already in four-wheel drive, high range. And I had a chip in that thing then. And I reached down. I had a bully dog chip. It had 4 positions. It had a switch: off, towing, economy, and performance. And I flipped that dude up on performance. And I put my foot in it. And I was throwing 4 rooster pails of dirt and gravel and crap out from behind me. And we went roaring up that hill. And I realized I was going so fast that the hill came up like this, and then the pavement's up here like this, and there's a ditch over here. And I realized that if I didn't slow down, I was going to jump the road and nosedive into the ditch on the other side. So I had to stomp on the brakes and skid the tires to slow down enough that when we hit the pavement, we slid around. When we came around that, when we had to slow down to make that turn, the 3 of them busted out of the cutover right beside the truck. Sammy starts yelling, there they are, they're coming after us. I floorboarded that truck on pavement, on good pavement. And praise the Lord, those tires hooked up. That damn F-250, it launched like a dadgum missile. And the thing about it is, I'm looking over here at them. They were keeping up with us. They were all quadrupedal, and except for one of them. At some point, he jumped up and got bipedal. But they kept up with us till we were passing 55 miles an hour. And it wasn't until we were past 55 miles an hour that we started making any decent distance on them. And I didn't slow down. I didn't stop. I didn't stop for about 3 or 4 miles. And then I only stopped just long enough to get it out of 4-wheel drive, and we took off, headed to the house. And but Sam, we're going down the road, and we finally gotten away from him. We're in 2-wheel drive, we're headed to the house, and we were just sitting there. In fact, we were still shaking. Sam's sitting over there, and he says, "Well, I know what to name that place." And I said, "What?" He said, "We're going to name it AP Road." And I said, "AP Road?" He said, "Yeah, Asshole Pucker Road." Excuse my language, guys, but that's how, and AP Road's sort of famous in our group, and that's how it got its name.
That's funny.
Do you know that, seriously, that alpha right there was the only one I've ever encountered in all my years of research that we could successfully call up during the day. That ended up being a place for years that if people were giving me a hard time, real bad time, and like especially at work, about Bigfoot and stuff, I would challenge them. I'd say, "All right, big man, you ain't got a hair on your butt if you won't get in the truck with me, and we'll go down there after work, and I'll show you." I had very, very few people ever take me up on it, and finally we had a guy that came over from. We had some very extremely specialized equipment in our plant. There were only 2 or 3 pieces. There were 3 pieces of this equipment in the entire Western Hemisphere. They were made in Germany, and we had one of the German engineers over helping us do a shutdown on this piece of equipment. And he was teasing me and carrying on a bunch of stuff. So I gave him the challenge, and by golly, he took me up on it. Carried him down there, and we went into the picnic area. I didn't take him back down that stupid road. We went into the picnic area off the trace. Went in there and turned around, and I made one call, and it answered. Made another call, and here it came. And it showed up right there in the picnic area in broad daylight, and he saw it. And what absolutely terrified him was once he realized that we had to drive right past it to get out of there, and it was going to be on his side of the truck, and made a believer out of him. But yeah, that was a scary situation, and gosh, there's been so many.
When that dude in that dang pickup up yonder out in Decatur, Alabama. Me and Tim and my buddy Alan and Jimmy Osner.
Yeah.
He used the infamous Shofar horn that night and called that son of a gun in from where you figure he was over a mile away.
Yeah, something like that. He's at least a mile away. Yeah.
Tim called that son of a gun in. He hit that right note on that Shofar horn. And it was just like the stars aligned and everybody's eyes got bright. And, I mean, when he hit that note, it just echoed across the Tennessee River. And I mean, just as soon as it quit echoing, that booger screamed, roared, whatever you want to call it. And it was like he done that, and then Tim screamed at him back, and the son of a gun was gaining ground. He was coming to us.
Yeah, he was coming hard and fast.
He was coming fast. I'm talking about Tim hollered at him. He'd give him just a couple of minutes, and he'd holler back. And it was like, uh-oh. And then the last time we got a report out of him, that son of a gun, probably a couple 100 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim looks around at us and goes, guys, we better go. Well, they didn't nobody argue and ask, well, why and how come? And you sure? Shoot. Everybody there was slamming truck doors, and we had the trucks cranked, and we was leaving.
You gonna tell them what else happened?
Yeah, that was the same night that we went boogering right after a big storm. I mean, it'd been tornadoes come through. We decided to go boogering anyway. The storm's done moved through. A front came through. And we met in Decatur, Alabama at Big Bob Gibson's barbecue joint 8. And it was probably 9:30. We went boogering, went 5 or 6 places, went all over. all over up, North Alabama and that around Decatur. And to get into where there was an old closed boat launch.
Well, it was an old mussel fisherman camp.
Yeah,
what it was.
Yeah, and they had a boat launch there. But
yeah,
we were going on this road, and about 3/4 of a mile before we got there, there was 3 big poplar trees. I'm talking about like nearly big as a 5-gallon bucket.
Yeah,
and there were 2 nearly touching. And then you had about a 2 or 3 foot gap in the third one. There were 3 trees laying all the way from ditch to ditch on this big gravel road.
Yep.
Well, instead of us turning around and having enough sense to turn around, we decided that him and his 4-wheel drive, and me and mine, that we could crawl over these things.
Yeah,
And-
going. The logs are laying like this. We couldn't have gotten over straight. We'd have got hung up. But if we went over at a diagonal, we could crawl up one tire, and work our way over. So Greg and I both put our trucks in low lock 4-wheel drive, and we carefully crawled over. And
Yeah, that's when we got on down the other, say 3/4 of a mile to this abandoned little wide spot with the boat launch, and all this is happening, and we're sitting there and we let everything get quiet. Well, from the direction we came in, we kept hearing you could tell it was a diesel truck.
Yeah,
and we'd all agreed that somebody's in a Dodge, sound like a Cummins turbo diesel.
Yeah,
and you could hear this thing, the turbo spool up, you could hear it let off and spew, and you could hear gravel flying. I mean, from this distance, this dude is making all kind of racket.
What we figured out, he had come in there, was trying to come in there behind us. He tried to go over straight and got hung up.
Yeah. Well, amongst us hearing all this way back down the road from us, that's when Tim hits the shofar and he goes to screaming. And this booger is, plowing through the woods coming to us. And he's coming hard, he's coming fast, and he is upset. Well, that about the time Tim goes, boys, we really need to go. Is we jump in the trucks and slam the doors and crank up. We go about 50 feet, and when we go into the road to go out, we had to stop and wait. This guy's in a 3/4 ton, big lifted up Dodge diesel 4-wheel drive. He's meeting us. Well, as he comes into the little parking area, we cut around by him, and we got it nailed. I mean, we're flying down that road. We're getting the heck out of Dodge.
And he's got a grin on his face, looking at us like, yeah, I ran them out of here.
Yeah.
And so he stopped. We hauled ass.
Yeah. We get back up to those trees. Tim goes over them, just like we did at an angle. Then I go over them, and Tim's decided, well, we could just take a chain and jerk these things out of the road.
Yeah, we can be good citizens.
Yeah, we're 3/4 of a mile from where this just happened. And we know dudes down there with them or with whatever just come in. So we pull off on the shoulder. Now, we pull off all the way out of the road.
Yeah.
Just as we step out of the truck, I'm like, oh, shit. And you can hear this diesel is spooled up and this dude's hammered down. And he comes around, he comes around a curve about 75 yards from us. I bet the boy's running 45, 50 mile an hour.
Yeah.
And we just step over up against our trucks like, oh, crap. That moron hit that first tree. And I was waiting on the Dukes of Hazzard horn to blow.
Yeah.
This thing went in the air. I guarantee you I could have stood. I'm 6'1". If I'd been standing past that third log, he would have never touched me. It went airborne.
Yeah.
And stayed in the air forever. And that truck come down, it hit, and it bounced, and it come up, and it bounced again. This whole truck.
He went off in the ditch on the left side.
Yeah, he run off the road on one side, went back to the other.
He never let off of it. And all 4 tires just geysers of water. Geysers of dirt coming out of them.
I looked at Tim. I said, reckon what he saw down there. And then we decided we may or not to stay here and pull these trees out of the road.
Yeah.
So we left them.
Yeah. So what we tried to do, we knew the road. We decided, well, let's see if we can catch that guy. We never came close. We never saw his taillights. Nothing. Nothing. We never came close. And there were some long straightaways in that road.
Y'all, I'm not kidding. I bet the guy was no joke. This guy was running 35 mile an hour when he hit that first tree. Well, I don't know how it didn't just roll the whole front end out from under the truck.
Yeah, I'd love to know what brand lift kit he had under that truck, because if I was ever going to lift a truck, I'd want that brand of lift kit, because it was heavy duty survive what he did to that thing. I mean, most Dodges have a weak front end. I truly expected that front axle just to roll up underneath that truck, and him land on his front bumper, but it didn't.
DA, I noticed our buddy Troy, that Tim was talking about, Troy Allen, Big Georgia Tracker. He talking about the Shofar is dangerous, so be aware before using it in the woods. Mm-hmm. And we've had people ask here lately if Coonbo's still using the Shofar, and he's pretty much retired the Shofar.
No, we've had them come in. They all come in hard and fast every time, and they come in so far. All of them have come in and slammed on the brakes once they got in there to us. But that one right there, I'm not sure he would have slammed on the brakes. But then I've read stuff in the Bible and in some obscure verses in the Book of Enoch and in some other places in some of the other non-canonical books that I've played with that thing enough that I am 100% convinced that that Bigfoot, not Dogman, but normal Bigfoot, have at least some Nephilim in them. That they're at least part Nephilim, because the Shofar, if you get to digging deep enough in the ancient Aramaic and the ancient Greek, that the Shofar was known as the voice of God. And if you read some of the scriptures, say that the Shofar, that the Nephilim are compelled to respond to the voice of God. Well, for a long time I thought, okay, yeah, well, we're compelled to respond to the voice of God too, or if he's speaking directly to us, and or maybe we're supposed to be compelled, but we don't necessarily do it. But the Nephilim, okay, that when God speaks, they're compelled. But then we further research showed that what the phrase "the voice of God" in that context meant was a very specific type of shofar. And I started working with some Jewish scholars. I mean, this research took over 10 years. Over 10 years. And before we ever tried it, before we ever figured it out, first figured out exactly what they were talking about, what to do with it, how to blow it. It took me 2 or 3 years to learn how to blow it. And I mean, you can make all kind of different noises and stuff with it, but there's only 2 notes that it'll respond to, that they'll respond to. And
are they high or low notes?
Better not tell them. We'll tell you off the air.
Well, yeah, that's an off the air thing. But I'm telling you, I was working with some very, 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 very serious Jewish scholars and mystics, and most of them were from up in New York. And these guys, they know their stuff. I mean, when I told them what I was doing, most of them quit helping me, but there was one that hung in there like a hair in a biscuit. He wouldn't ever just give me information. He'd give me enough tidbits that I could go and do further research and come back with more questions. And if I asked the exact correct question, worded exactly correctly, he would give me a straight answer, but very brief in as few words as possible. So, but it took me, I had to learn. I mean, I can't pick up, like I couldn't pick up an original manuscript of the Iliad or the Odyssey and start reading the ancient Greek. But I learned how to study it and decipher it, and I could go through it, and I could sit there and write it down and read it, can translate it into English and stuff, even some of the very ancient stuff. I learned how to do that with ancient Aramaic. And it's freaking amazing the information that's out there if you're willing to spend the time digging for it. That's why, I'm not just going to give away years and years and years of research. And but we There we go.
Don't get too much of me, we're ugly, Mom.
But anyway, we did enough that we became convinced that Bigfoot are descended from Nephilim. They've got some Nephilim blood. I successfully called once I learned how to blow it, once I obtained the correct type of shofar, and then learned how to blow it, and learned the correct 2 notes, that I've successfully used it in Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky. Yeah, Kentucky. Let's see, I said Iowa.
Using Georgia.
I think I did. I've used it in North Carolina. North Carolina. Oh, I've used it in Louisiana one time. Use it in Louisiana. So anyway, I've used it in enough places, and usually multiple places in any of those states. And I get now. Other than that time that we just told you about, when that booger was coming in hard and fast, and we took off out of that old camp and left that guy sitting there in that truck. Is other than that, what's happened every other time was the boogers came in hard, fast, and usually loud until they laid eyes on us. Once they laid eyes on us, they just stopped. And they just stand there looking at us. And it took me a long time to figure out what they were doing. I finally found out by digging through enough of the right scripture that they were waiting for instructions. Well, I didn't know what instructions to give them. I found some hints of the kind of instructions they were waiting for. And some of the instructions that they were waiting for that I have found, that you can do enough digging in the Old Testament to find this, and a little bit in the New Testament, that they are going to be one of the instruments of destruction that's going to wipe out a major portion. One of the things that's going to be wiping out a bunch of the humans in the end times. That there are a number of references in the Bible to the beasts will be loosed upon the earth, and they are one of the things that will be killing off a chunk of the human population. So I thought, well, I don't want to screw up and start that prematurely. And I'm dealing with something that's way over my head. This is, so that's why I quit messing with it. And I strongly advise other people that think they're going to use it to not, because you don't know what you're dealing with. And
I've witnessed him blow it enough to know that I'm not comfortable around somebody blowing one.
Nope. I won't do it anymore. It definitely, if there's any within earshot, they're going to come. I've called them from at least 2 miles away before. And I've called up as many as I've called 4 different family units up at one time before. And this is another weird thing. Normally you get that many family units, that many alpha males in close proximity of each other where they can see each other, there's going to be a fight. There's never, ever been a fight amongst them when I've called them in. And I've had different family units standing there within 75, 80 feet of each other. And all they're focused on us. And they just stand there and they'll hang around for 30 to 45 minutes and finally say, well, the heck with it. And they'll turn around and amble off. Even then, they don't fight. So I finally came to the conclusion that I was messing with something that I did not need to be messing with.
What made you make the connection to the Shofar and Nephilim?
I got to study it myself and another researcher that he doesn't want me using his name, but very, very, very humble gentleman, but exceedingly smart fella. He was the first one that came up with the idea, and he knew that I, studied the Bible some and stuff like that, and I like to dig into that old scriptures and things. So he ran some stuff by me, said, look, I'm beginning to think that this, he said, I've been reading some of this stuff, and when they're talking about the voice of God, first he was just studying Nephilim, trying to figure out all the characteristics of Nephilim. And one of the things he found out in some ancient texts was that the Nephilim are compelled to respond to the voice of God. And he couldn't figure out what the voice of God was. So he asked, he got to asking me about it, and I didn't know. So the two of us worked on this for a long time, trying to figure out what the voice of God was. And like I said, we eventually figured out it was a shofar, a very specific type of shofar. Not only what animal it came from, but how long it was, and how very specific things about the shofar. And my gosh, it took a long time to do that. I mean, we were digging through old Bibles. There's stuff in some of these ancient Bibles going back into the 1500s and 1600s and stuff that aren't in new Bibles. And the newest Bible that we looked at doing all this research was printed in the 1820s. And most everything we looked at was from the 1600s and 1700s, as far as Bibles, printed Bibles go. But we had to go back, dig into a lot of old texts. But we finally, in going through and looking at the ancient Aramaic and the ancient Greek, like I said, we figured out that what the voice of God was. And so once we figured it out, the next thing we had to do was get a hold of one, and then we had to learn how to blow it. And like I said, we've got pretty close to 15 years invested, way over 10 years invested in all this. It was a long, slow, drawn out process. And if I had it to do over again, I would have never gone public with it, because now there's all kind of people out there messing around with shofars that don't need to be messing with shofars. I wish I had kept it much, much quieter. But
I may would have not believed it if I hadn't witnessed it myself.
Yeah,
seen it work.
Well, if there is, I could give you a list of, probably 25 different people that have been with me that have witnessed it. Yeah.
Yeah, at least.
We've just started experimenting with the shofar.
You better be careful.
Yeah.
Oh, we're armed to the teeth anytime we're out, but I'm not sure if we've got the right one and the right note. In fact, I've got a video if you guys would like to see it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is my son. He's my oldest son. He's learning to play it.
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, none of those notes were the notes that would bring them instantly, but what that will do is I was blowing some notes like that, and I thought, well, shoot, that sounds like the old bullhorn that we used to blow to call in the dogs. And where I lived at the time was up there in northern Missouri, and I lived, like I said, my property backed up to a state park. There were, thousands of acres of woods around me, and I decided, well, at that time I had 4 German Shepherds, and they'd take off. I had 43 acres of property right there, and plus there were, like I said, thousands of acres of state land they could roam around on. And I thought, well, man, this thing blows a lot louder than the old bullhorn, because I've got an old bullhorn, and I could hit a note like what your son's doing there. I said, maybe the dogs will come to that. So I used it a time or two they'd be out, and I'd step out on the back deck and cut loose blowing those notes there. And sure enough, the dogs would show up, after a minute or two. And the trouble was that a couple of 3 nights later, we're in the bed sound asleep, and we had these big Anderson atrium doors that went out of the living room and went out of the great room and went out of our bedroom out on the back deck. The back deck was 67 feet long and up to 12 feet wide. The end where our bedroom was about 10, 12 feet off the ground. Well, maybe not quite. It's at least 10 feet off the ground. The other end was only about 4 feet off the ground. And that's where the stairs were. We're in the bed about 1:30 in the morning, and our female shepherd always slept on the foot of the bed. And then we had a big half shepherd, half Belgian Malinois. And this dog, you talking about something hell on wheels now. A shepherd Malinois cross, especially if the female is a shepherd and the male, the father is a Malinois, you get an ungodly dog out of it. We're talking about 110 pounds and an astoundingly smart dog and unbelievable guard dog. Plus, we had a retired canine unit, and we had a dog is half, well, ain't no guard dog. He's half or part husky and part shepherd. Looks mostly shepherd. Anyway, so they're all there in the bedroom. We're sound asleep, and all of a sudden, the little female shepherd that was asleep on the foot of the bed, she just goes crazy and just goes flying off the bed and hitting the door. That big is full glass door, hitting that door. And Duke, the big Malinois shepherd cross, he comes up off the ground. He's ready to take the whole wall out. And the other dog, Jake, he's the old canine unit. He's in there with Duke. He's trying to make a hole through that wall. I raise up, what in the world is going on? And there's a dadgum booger standing there on the deck. And now we've got motion lights out there. All the motion lights are on. And it's standing there and it's having to bend over. It's bent over like this and looking in the door. And its face is within, a foot and a half, 15, 18 inches of the door. And these dogs are doing their dadgumdest to take the whole window unit, the whole atrium assembly, the big window plus the door, plumb out of the wall. And even old Joe, the shepherd husky cross, he was in there getting it, going crazy. And when I raised up in the bed and I let loose a couple of appropriate expletives, it saw me. It made eye contact with me. And I keep a 9mm laying on my bedside table. I roll like it. I grabbed that 9mm, and when I came back over with it, its eyes got big, and it whirled out and took off down the length of the deck. And I was going to run out. I was going to run out the door and shoot I wasn't going to shoot at it. I was just going to shoot 2 or 3 times out through the trees to scare it. And I wasn't even going to shoot in the direction of it. I wanted him to hear some ricocheting bullets and hear some muzzle blast. My wife goes ape, and she's about tackling me. No, don't go out there. Well, it ran down the length of the deck and jumped over the railing at the far end of the deck, never broke stride. And now it shook the house very noticeably. We got out there over the next day or two, and myself, and then I've got a friend that's he's like, he's a lot bigger than I am. He got out there and jumped up and down, and we couldn't even come close to shaking the house like it shook when that one ran down the length of the deck. Couldn't even get even remotely in the neighborhood of the amount of shaking that it did to our house. Now, the bad part about it is my wife had a hosta. I don't know if y'all know what hosta plants are, but she had this real nice little planter deal that I had. It's 3 different layers, tri-layer, and little hosta garden, and I had some real rare varieties of hosta. When this thing came up out of the woods, out of the creek bottom that's back behind the house, the ground we'd had some rain and stuff. He left a good trackway. He was throwing 17.5-inch tracks, and on about a 60-inch stride. From the heel of one track to the heel of the next track was 60 inches, and they were one right straight in front of the other, which tells me that it's a male, and the tracks are real blocky looking. And the tracks are, about 9 inches wide across the ball of the foot, maybe even a little wider than that. And in one of the tracks, he stepped right in the middle of one of those hosta beds and squished some of the wife's hosta. And boy, that aggravated her bad. I was going to cast that track, and she got in there and tore it all up and leveled it all out before I could get to cast it. And but I figured out then that even if you blow the shofar and you don't blow the right notes, they will eventually come around. If there's any that hear it, even if you're not hitting the exact right notes, they're going to come around investigating. I think they recognize it as a shofar as opposed to a bullhorn or something.
We did get response. We just didn't get what we expected.
Say what now?
I said we did get a response, just not what we expected.
Right. They will come around. It's just they're not going to come like they would if it was, if you were hitting the exact right notes.
We tried. There's a place down here in Missouri called Moon Valley down on the Nangle River, and we tried for about half an hour, and we were picking up lots of vocalizations coming back down the valley with the parabolic mic, but they never got closer.
Right. Yeah, they will answer you. I got a lot of answers when I was learning how to blow the things, but they wouldn't come in then. But I firmly believe that they will come around later on. They'll sneak in there. And this one got up on our deck and never made a sound. Didn't alert the dogs until the motion light right beside our door, right beside the door going out of our bedroom onto the deck. Until that, all the rest of them were already on. The ones even down on the lower part of the deck, underneath the deck, those are all on. But until that one clicked on right there by the door, she and it leaned over, was looking in. She never. They didn't. Even the dogs didn't know it was there. But once she saw it though, if we'd have been outside, that thing would have killed all 4 of my dogs, because after I've investigated a lot of stuff, and I've seen for myself what what they can do to dogs when they're mad. I don't care how bad your dog is and how many you got. Boogers, they literally go through them like tearing up loaves of bread.
Yeah, I've heard lots of stories of them going after dogs.
Yeah, dogs are normal prey for them.
And the other thing I've noticed here in Missouri is if you've got a dog with you, it'll bring in the hogs. Feral hogs will come in on you if you've got a dog with you at your campsite.
Oh Lord, okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, I discovered that up on the Current River and up on the Big Piney, both places. We had a dog with us, and both times we had wild hogs come in trying to get to the dog. And the second time it happened up near the Big Piney, we ended up shooting 4 or 5 of them trying to get out of there because they were coming in.
Dang.
Wow.
Well, one of the things we've also learned is if you're in an area where there are wolves, if you've got a dog with you, having a dog in the camp will bring wolves in. We had 4 or 5 wolves try to lure one of my German shepherds out of the camp one time up there in LBL, and I mean it did all the stuff. What amazed me when it was doing it, it was just like right out of Call of the Wild, where Jack London described the wolves trying to lure his sled dogs out, or his dog out of the camp, or some of the sled dogs away. And the wolves came up and they scattered out, and all of them but one hid. And then this one female dog, she comes up there and starts, acting like she's in heat, and then she wants to play and doing all this stuff, was trying to lure my male shepherd out of the camp.
Mm-hmm. And if he had went out of the camp, you never would have seen him again.
Oh no, they'd have had him. Yeah, they were inviting him to dinner, to be dinner. Yeah, we never seen him. I actually had the boogers get one of my dogs one time and literally tore her to pieces. And that was, when at that time I wasn't very smart about how to take care of a dog in booger country. It's one of the things. That's one of my regrets that I've had for decades.
I know what Bill White kept saying, that one of the key notes on a Bigfoot, it just said grab them in the middle and just pull them.
Yeah, I've seen them, ripped apart. All the legs ripped off of them, heads snatched off of them. I've seen them twisted. Their bodies just grab them and just twist them like that. And if the legs are still on, you'll have, 2 of the legs up like this and 2 down like that. Where they've twisted their spine in 2. And they're pretty brutal to dogs.
I still think one of the creepiest encounters that you've ever been associated with, or somebody ever told you that you relayed to me, was that woman up there where they kept trying to get in her house, and then after she finally fled, they busted through the floor and went in.
Yeah, those were type 3s. Lady up in Iowa, and this lady I had, we'd been on the same forums since back in the 90s, and she'd asked me questions off and on, for decades. And, after I moved up to Missouri, I knew I had heard lots and lots of reports in southern Iowa, especially southeastern Iowa. So I started doing a lot of research over there between Keokuk and along the Mississippi, between Keokuk and Fort Madison. But there were boogers all over the place. And right there by Keokuk is the mouth of the Des Moines River. And I started working my way up the Des Moines River because it was fairly close. And I just kept running into them all over the place, up and down the Des Moines River. I found this one particular place that seemed to be quite a concentration of them, and they were not very wary. I could call them up easily, and they are not quite as easily as we could over at AP Road. But when they did come up, they weren't angry like the ones at AP Road. They would just come up and they would stand there. And this is just calling with my voice. This is years and years before I started messing with the. This is years before I started messing with the Shofar. And they would come up and they would stand there and look at you, and the alpha would and they'd have the whole family. This is what really got me. There'd be the big ones and the younger ones, and this is what was really interesting. I was around this one particular family unit enough that I figured out, and I had this suspicion before, but watching these over a period of months and years, that it's the female. There's a male alpha and a female alpha. It's the female that really calls the shots of what they're going to do and where they're going to go. And the alpha is sort of the alpha male is sort of the enforcer. But they would come up, and especially the female, it looked like she was making a genuine effort to try to communicate with us, trying to talk to us. And so I kept going back to this one area, and I had to be real careful because there was a house right there less than 100 yards away from where I was encountering these things along the edge of a field that was across the road from this house. And I got where I'd come up there, and it was like they recognized the sound of my truck. And I could come up there, and I wouldn't even have to call, and they would show up within about 15, 20 minutes. And so I'm online on this forum that we were members of, and I mentioned that I had been having a lot of success up in southern Iowa. And there was this lady that, like I said, I had texted back and forth with her. I mean, on the forum several times, answering questions and stuff. And she said, "Well, where in southern Iowa are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm along the Des Moines River." And she said, "Well, I live on my property. My husband's family's property is along the Des Moines River." And she said, "Where are you at?" So I told her, and she said, "Oh my gosh." She said, "That's where I live." And she said, and she told me the name of the road and gave a good enough description of her house, that their house, I realized that this place I'd been going for months, the house that was right there about 100 yards away was their house. And so I thought about it for a while, and finally I decided to tell her that, yeah, I've met your boogers. And then she got to telling me that their family, that her husband's family, had been habituating these boogers for generations. And she knew some of their language, but her granddaughter could talk freely with them. Well, I wanted to see this. So we set up a time that I was going to go up there. In the meantime, her husband had a heart attack and died. So after a while, I said, well, just, I just sent her a text or PM'd her on the forum. And I said, "Look, when you feel like it, just holler at me." So I didn't hear from her for about 6 months. And one day I came in there and got on the forum, and this was the old Alabama Bigfoot Research Forum, the old ABRF. But even though she was in Iowa, she was a member of that forum. But anyway, I got on there and I saw I had a message, and it was her. And she said, "Okay." She said, I'd like for you to come up. I'd like for you to meet our boogers." Okay. She said, "No cameras, no video, no still camera, no regular cameras, no flashes." She said, "You can meet them. You can talk to them, but I don't want anything. I don't want any pictures, videos, anything like that. No thermals, no nothing. Okay. So I went up there, and talking through her granddaughter, we actually talked to the matriarch several times, and the granddaughter was able to tell me that, well, that right there, that's actually her granddaughter. That's her older daughter right there, and she was able to point out the stuff. And
How were you able to communicate?
the granddaughter talked to them directly. She could speak their language, and I picked out a few words, and I know a few of their words, but a lot of it is mixtures. It's some of the words are Native American words. Like there was a fair amount of Shawnee in there. There was a fair amount of the Fox dialect, part of the Osage dialect, Osage Indian dialect. She actually, since she wouldn't let us record any of it. And the granddaughter said, well, this is, she knew, she was able to figure out what some of it was, but a little bit of it I recognized. And not much, but just a little. But we talked several times. Now, get this. She called me up one day. She actually called me at work, and she was very, very upset. And she said that the matriarch had come to her. Oh, the lady fed them pancakes off of her porch, off of her back deck, every single day, every single morning. And sometimes she'd make homemade donuts, and she gave them what I'd consider junk food every day. But they would come in and eat the stuff right off of her back deck. And so anyway, the lady called, and she was all upset, and her granddaughter was crying. I could hear the granddaughter crying in the background. And she said that they had been warned, that the matriarch had come in and warned them and told them that they had to go, that they had to leave, and told them where they were going to go. But they said there were some evil ones coming in. But they were going to get gone before the evil ones got there, and warned the lady that they were evil and to beware of them or something. I don't remember the exact words. Anyway, they took off. They left, and this had happened the day before, and that morning they didn't come in, and they had called them and called them and called them, and they didn't show up. So they determined that, they decided that, well, they really had left. And she wanted to know about what I knew about the evil ones. Well, at that time, I didn't know about the evil ones. Well, when they finally showed up, what they were are the type 3s, the baboon-headed ones, the snouted ones, the beast of 7 shoots type. That's what they were. They came up to the lady's house, and I think they must have been watching for a while. They came up to the lady's house, up to her deck, like they were wanting food. The lady went and cooked a bunch of pancakes for them and brought out for them, and they ate them, but they were looking at her the whole time, and it ain't one of these things like, Mama, she's looking at me. It was, she said she felt evil in them. Okay. She decided to not feed them anymore. They came back the next morning, and they actually tore off part of the railing on her back deck. So she gave them a box of donuts or something like that she had. They came back that night, actually that afternoon, and started trying to tear into her basement tried to tear her basement door apart. She and her actually the husband had already died by this time. He'd been dead for over a year. She got her, I think her son-in-law maybe. Anyway, a family member came down there, and they screwed 3/4 inch plywood to the back wall, to the outside of the back wall of their basement. There was only about a 25 foot section of the back wall that was not concrete, that was wooden. So they covered all that over, including the door and everything, with 3/4 inch plywood. In a couple places around the door, it was like doubled up. And that night, they came in there and they tore that off and got in there and got in her basement and started busting up through the floor into her house. She jumped up in the middle of the night and ran out with just the clothes she had and grabbed her purse. Just what she had on, grabbed her purse and maybe a checkbook, or just what she could grab on the way out, jumped in the truck and took off. And I came up there and a day or two later, and me and a couple of guys, and we went in there heavily armed. We walked in the door. She gave us keys to the place was standing open, but she gave us a set of keys. Went in there. The place had a very strong urine smell in it. In the living room, right in front of the fireplace, there was a hole probably 4 feet across, 4 or 5 feet across, busted up through the floor. And the place was ransacked. Just clothes and stuff strewn everywhere. The kitchen area had been torn up. The refrigerator was standing there with the door open. It was torn all up. And the place was. We looked around and we found a few tracks. And a lot of people say the type 3s, the snouted ones, all have clawed feet. That's not true. The tracks we found, we didn't find any tracks that had clawed toes. Now, I've seen a lot of clawed toe tracks.
How many toes did they have?
That's the thing. I've seen a lot of type 3 tracks that were 3-toed, but I think that's a genetic defect. There may be actually the bone structure of 5 toes in there, but weird feet like that is even common in people when they're badly inbred. And
So I mean, did that one have?
Those had. That's the thing. Up there around her house, I saw 5-toed tracks. I saw 4-toed tracks. Very few 4-toed. I saw some 3-toed, and we found a couple. We're not sure if they were or not. Found a couple that may have had 6 toes, or it may have been one knuckle walking, and right over the top of another track that made it look like it had 6 toes. I don't know, but most of the ones we found, most of them were 5-toed, and some 3-toed. But the lady never went back to her stuff. We offered to get in there and clean her house out and everything, and she said no. She said we brought her something, and it reeked. I had to put it in the back of my truck, and it absolutely reeked. And she said she couldn't clean it up. She washed it and several different things. She said she couldn't get the smell out of it. She said she didn't want anything to do with that house. And now, we came and went up there several times. She finally decided she wanted to try to find some pictures and stuff out of the house. And so we went up there with her, and she got in there, and we helped her get some pictures and things, a few little things out of the house. But they ended up selling the place, which is really sad because it had been in her husband's family for generations. I mean, we're talking about like back into since white man had first come into that part of the country.
I've often said I don't want to be the one to shoot one of these things. But
Right.
I'm not going to get ran out of my home either. I will fight.
Me,
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
might get me, but they're going to remember my damn name when they're done.
Well, think about this. So if you're a lady, this lady is older than I am. And at the time this happened, she was already up in her late 50s, early 60s. And you're there by yourself, no neighbor within sight. And these things in the middle of the night are busting up through the floor of your house. And you've already seen them up close. And you've felt the evil in them. You know, I think she did the right thing. You know, unless she had a Laws rocket, unless she had a bank of armed Laws rockets laying there, I don't think she would have had a chance of saving the place.
Well,
And
you know, even at that point, I think I might have bugged out of the area, but I'd have come back and brought hell with me.
Yeah. Well, there were people that offered to do that. She had some of her some family members that wanted to do that. In fact, I don't know how it was connected, but and I never did find out about it. Supposedly, like one of her husband's cousins that lived about 4 miles away. Supposedly, he shot at some of them. I've never been able to confirm nor deny that. I mean, I don't know. You know, he was claiming to do it, but then there were some other circumstances that led me to believe that he probably didn't.
I know enough old boys with firearms. We'd have turned that into a siege of Lockett Ranch situation real damn fast.
Right. Yeah.
We'd have put down an impressive volume of fire. It might have got me, but he was going to wade through a yard of hell to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, you know, I'm gonna keep my opinion to myself for now because I don't want to hurt. This is a dear lady, and she did.
In her
she did
situation,
the
I think
best
she did the right thing.
She absolutely
I'm just saying
did.
how I would have reacted. I'm not getting run off my land.
Yeah. I mean, I could see an older lady by herself, but
Right.
I'm like, DA, I mean, that's another reason I've been staying over here so much. I mean, you know, I'm staying here. Last night, 1:35, straight up, 1:35 Central Time. I was on a video cast with me and River Morris in Australia, David Blaylock in Oregon. And we had Jeff Yarrington on here with us, but Jeff had fell off to sleep on us. He was snoring. But look, I was sitting in my recliner, had my phone. We were just live chatting amongst us, you know, wasn't broadcast. All the doors shut. My TV was on, turned down low, and something hit my propane tank, which is 20 foot from the front porch and about, say, 30 feet from where I was sitting. It hit my propane tank so hard, it rung like a church bell. That's a 500-gallon propane tank. The thing's over 10 feet long. It rung that propane tank like a church bell to the point that when it done it, I jerked my head and looked toward the wall. River Morris in Australia and David in Oregon, both of them said, "What in the hell was that?" I said, "Y'all heard that, didn't you?" They said, "By God, it was loud." I said, "Yeah, something just smacked my propane tank here in the yard." And then we tried to be quiet and listen, never heard anything else. But that was last night, this morning at 1:35. So I'm like you. I'm not going to get run off. Now, they may get me one day, but it's going to be really, really, really loud, and it's going to be really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
100% there with you, man. Guys, I could keep talking all night. I'm loving listening to the stories, but Robbie's got to get up for work in the morning, and I have to start prepping for surgery in the morning. So we're going to start winding things down.
When now your surgery is what, Friday?
It's Friday morning, but I got a bunch of crap I got to do tomorrow leading up to it.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Well, man, we'll be thinking about you and praying about you.
Appreciate it.
No doubt.
Coonbo, thank you so much for coming on, man. I've really looked forward to having you on. I love listening to the stories. Yeah, but there's just a ton of information there. I think if we had another 2.5 hours, we wouldn't get to all of it. Once I've recovered, I'd like to get you back on.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, DA, what I mean, everybody wants to hear the stories and stuff, but what I'm mostly about now is teaching people. And, I've got pushing 50 years, into this. Well, actually, I started messing around with them pretty seriously back in the 60s. Like I said, I called up my first one when I was 12 years old. And I've had other encounters with them from, when I was just in my early teens. And, but I just, I'm nowadays, I'm more interested in teaching people about them, teaching them things like, just basic stuff like, when you go in the woods, when you anywhere where you're going to park your vehicle that's not in your driveway or the Walmart parking lot, turn that thing around and get it pointed the safe way out.
Do that every time.
Yeah, and my dad taught me that at a very, very young age. I mean,
mine too.
I'm talking about out on the farm, driving the dadgum truck when I was 7 years old, out across the fields. And they'd, boy, turn that thing around and get it pointed the right way out in case something happens. You got to get out of here fast. Get in and crank it up, and throw it in gear and mash it, and you're going in a safe direction. My dad, taught us that kind of stuff from the early age. And but and stuff, how to tell the difference between a male track and a female track, how to tell if she's pregnant or not, or if she's or if she's had a kid or two. Tell them about the things they do when they're counting coup on you, the stuff they do, how they like to mess with us. There's just a ton of things I've learned over the years that that I want to impart to people. And even things I've learned about, a few things that I've learned about Dogman and things they do. There are certain things that you can come across out there. Like I've spent decades studying how they disassemble deer and cattle and the large game that they take apart, and exactly the process they do it and how they do it. And I'm probably the only one that's really gotten into that. And
speaking of disassembling a deer, what do you make of this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me show you something.
Is that near a railroad track, perhaps?
Nope, it's on a lake.
On a lake.
In fact, it's in an old abandoned campground that they bulldozed off. The only way we could get into it was by boat.
There's a chance that could be cougar, that could be a cougar.
That's an awful small tree for a cougar.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, the tree's only about the diameter of a softball, if that.
Oh, okay, then I'd say probably Booger did that then.
And about 30 yards farther down the road, there's a better view of it. Tree's not real big. The blood is still, and we found this too, about 30 yards away.
That's definitely Booger.
We had a ton of activity out there in that campground.
Yeah.
We were getting rocks thrown at us. We were hearing vocalizations.
Oh, yeah. That Sandy, was that last year when the deer head skull in the rack showed up from the tree in the front yard?
About September. Yeah, that's when you sent me the picture.
Yeah, we had last year we'd had some activity, and that's a fish head. Yeah, we'd had some activity there, and came out one morning, and there is a deer's skull, nice 8-point buck hanging in the tree, hanging a little cherry tree right there in front of the house, the closest tree to the front of the house, right there in the front yard.
Guys up in the Mark Twain National Forest. This was probably 30 years ago. We had a deer camp out in the Mark Twain National Forest, and we got up the next morning. There was a light frost on the ground, and there were 5 or 6 coyote skulls scattered around our camp.
Yep. Yeah. Yes, sir. I had them leave. Now this is creepy. My neighbor had a yellow lab. For a while. I lived on an island in a bayou there in northeast Mississippi, and a lot of people don't realize Mississippi's got about as many bayous as Louisiana does. But I lived on an island in a bayou, and I've drugged Greg out there before I showed it to him, and he can tell you it's a real nice little place. Real fun place to be in the middle of the night. But anyway, there was only two houses out there on that island, mine and a guy about 200 yards away from me. He always had Labrador retrievers, and they never lasted any length of time because he wouldn't let them in the house at night. He had a really nice house. He was single. He always trying to keep his house nice. And he never had pets. So he'd keep a dog for 6, 8, 9 months, maybe a year, and then he'd disappear. And I kept telling him, you need to let your dogs in at night, and they wouldn't disappear. Well, he had one. He called him Yaller. It was a yellow lab. And the poor dog would sleep underneath the guy's window, and would get out there and whine and stuff at night, wanting in. And he'd lean out the window and yell at the dog and stuff, try to run him off. The dog disappeared. 1 year later, we had a big corporate meeting where I worked, and the company had plants around the country, and they decided to have it there at Boonville, Mississippi that year. And so all these people came in from the plants around the country to Boonville, Mississippi. And we had this big lunch meeting and everything there at the tail end of the meeting. And they brought in all these Subway sandwiches. Well, they ended up with a big platter that was probably 2 foot across, stacked up literally probably 18 inches high, of leftover Subway sandwiches that people didn't eat. Well, me being the single guy in the bunch there from that plant, they gave all that big platter of sandwiches to me, and I took, to take home and eat. I took them home, and I ate off of them for 2 or 3 days. And, by this time they were getting all soggy and stuff. And so I had, boogers always around there. Every morning when I'd come out in the morning to get in the truck, I'd hear a whistle back behind the house. And I'd hear a wood knock down in the bayou answering. I'd come home from work. I'd get out of the truck. As soon as I got out of the truck, there'd be some kind of a bird call or a whistle or a little whoop or something. And there'd be some kind of an answer come out of the bayou. And so I knew they were around. I knew they were watching. They used to come up there around the house a lot at night because my dogs would go off. I set that platter of Subway sandwiches on the front porch. Just set them there on the corner of the front porch. Next morning I came out. The platter was totally empty. And what was the funniest thing? There was a very neat stack of onions there, and there was a very neat stack of soggy tomatoes right next to that. Everything else was totally gone. But also, laying on the platter was a nice, round, smooth, flat, white rock. And there's hardly any rocks on there. I don't know where they had to go to get that thing. But right next to the platter was a dog's skull. It was completely clean. And obviously they'd had it in a fire ant mound or something that would clean it all off. I picked it up and I got to looking at it, and oh my God, the lower jaw was gone, but the right upper canine was sheared off at a weird angle. And Yeller, his right upper canine was sheared off at a weird angle. I instantly knew that was Yeller's skull. So my neighbor had already gone to work. He went to work about 30 minutes before me because he had longer to drive. That afternoon, as soon as he got home from work, I called him up. I got him to come over. I said, look here what they left on my front porch last night. And I showed him that skull. And he looked at that thing and he turned white. And he said, that's Yeller's skull. I didn't tell him to look at the tooth. He said, that's Yeller's skull. I said, yes, sir, it is. And he hadn't got, after Yeller disappeared, he never got another dog. But he said, as long as I'm living here, I'm not going to get one. I'll not ever have another dog. When I moved away, my job took me to Missouri from there. And it wasn't very long at all that his house mysteriously burned down and he moved out of there because that left him out there on that island by himself. And that place is crawling with boogers. And
Sounds like a great place to go.
yeah. Oh, we go down there. We go down there, fairly often. And
I would love to go down there.
yeah. In fact, you ever heard me tell the story about the revival that was busted up by a booger showing up for the revival?
Don't
Have you
think I
heard
have.
You haven't?
I don't think so.
Well, this is an incident that happened about 1.5 miles through the woods south of there, and about 2 miles south of there, and happened when I was living down there, and there is a church about 2 miles south of where I used to live that's abandoned. I mean, a nice church,
The big church.
a big church, abandoned out there that they had just got through adding on to and fixing it up, and they had a big revival there celebrating the church being finished. And it's right next to a place called Roaring Hollow. In fact, it's Roaring Hollow Baptist Church. And that church is sitting there abandoned. A booger showed up during the revival. Cleaned
I
that.
guess that beats Ray Stevens' Mississippi Squirrel Revival.
Absolutely.
They wish it was a squirrel.
Yeah. They were. I'm telling you, you got to see that place to believe it. And it's but now interesting thing about that, there's a couple of places in that old church where the floor's been busted up from underneath. My old house I lived in, now they've torn it down now, it's gone. But the first time I went back down there after I moved, they'd been up underneath my house and had busted up through the floor.
That's not the first time I've heard of that happening.
Right.
No.
I've heard of that a few times here in Missouri.
DA, you came to one of the outings up in LBL, didn't you?
No, I didn't make it.
Oh,
Robbie
Robbie
did, but I didn't get to make it.
Robbie, did you ever go down to what they call the holdouts house? That one house that's still left standing. It's down there like you're going towards the old blast furnace and the buffalo pens.
Robbie, we can't hear you, man. You lost audio.
Unmute your mic.
Robbie, be right. It's not unmuted. It's try unmuting it, Robbie. You're muted now, but
Yes, sound to go out every show.
at some point, Robbie loses sound. I don't know what it is.
I don't know what.
Robbie, can you talk? Yeah, you're going to have to back out and come back in. It's something about this platform. At some point during the night, happens at random times during the show, we lose Robbie. He just loses all audio. We can't figure out why. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It just happens at some random point during the shows. Once in a blue moon, he'll get all the way through the show without there being a hitch. But it got him tonight. He'll be right back, and when he pops back in, I'll put him back up.
There's a holdout house. That's what they called it. One of the last people that they were able to run out of Land Between the Lakes before the government took over. And can we hear you?
Probably now.
There we go.
Did you ever get down and see the old house that's still standing down there?
I think we drove by it, but
Yeah. It would have been on the east side of the road, somewhere north of the old blast furnace, or somewhere around the old blast furnace.
It's the paved road right there at that furnace. Or, no, not paved, but it may be paved a little bit. But anyway, it's the road just north of that old furnace.
Yeah, and it's not very far off the trace road, but you go in that thing and they busted up through the floor there. Interesting thing, my house in Mississippi, when they busted up through the floor there, it was right in front of the fireplace. The holdout house there in LBL, where they busted up through the floor, in front of the fireplace. Where they busted up through the floor, the lady's house up in in Iowa, right in front of the fireplace. I don't know what that's all about, but
I'm thinking, I'm glad I ain't got a damn fireplace.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, it's weird. Well, I know we're making you run over, but
Ordinarily that wouldn't be an issue if we were on a weekend. Robbie doesn't have to work, but he does do through the week. And with me having surgery Friday morning, I've got to kind of cut it early as well.
But I'd like I said, what motivates me now is teaching people, and
well, I would definitely like to have conversations where I can learn things. I want things I'd like to ask you, things I would love to learn.
Best thing y'all two can do was on about October is drag yourself right here where I'm sitting, because he ain't but 50 miles from me.
Well,
I'm sure I'm going to have 1,000,001 questions between now and then. Greg, will you give him my phone number?
I will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bobby, this last outing, I normally take people around and show them around different things, but this last outing I was not doing well at all. I had just had major back surgery, and so I never left the camp. At the meet and greet where you were up there, and I think we met and talked briefly.
yeah. We set up the show right in front of your camper, and you came in.
Yeah, I got to talk to you briefly when we were getting ready to start the show. You'd given me your email address to contact you, but I heard you got a tick-borne illness, and I didn't want to bother you until you were feeling better.
Yeah, I ended up getting not only Rocky Mountain spotted fever again, but I got this dadgum alpha gal, which is another tick-borne illness. They used to think that alpha gal was an allergy that people would get after having another tick-borne illness, but now they know it's a standalone tick-borne illness of its own, and they don't know. At this point, they don't know. There's two versions of it. Actually, they say totally there's about a little over 20 different versions. They know that at this point that the only thing that I'm reactive to is beef that's not fully cooked. If I try to eat a medium rare or medium steak or even medium well, it just goes right through me. It makes me sick. If I eat a well done or really dry fried hamburger, I can keep it down. But fortunately, I'm only reactive to beef, and but they say that. But there's two versions of that. One that lasts about 3 years and then goes away, and then one that never goes away. They don't know at this point which one I've got. So,
Well, I hope to God I never get that, because I love rare beef.
Man.
me too. Greg will tell you.
Oh, yeah.
We just got an alert put out just today. I saw it online from the Missouri Department of Conservation that Lone Star tick is now here in Missouri.
Wow.
That is true.
Mm.
I eat so damn much garlic. They don't like me much.
Hey, DA, the tick lady for Northern Missouri works unless she's retired now, she works at Truman State University up there in Kirksville, where I used to work. And I knew her very well. she's also the cougar tracking lady for Northern Missouri. And what was funny, when
I
they
just saw a picture of a black cougar that was taken down by Stockton Lake.
yes,
Wow.
sir. Oh yeah, they've got black ones. They've got the standard. They've got the standard, buff colored ones or tan ones. They've also got one they call a melanistic that's almost like a Siamese cat. They are darker on the extremities but lighter in the middle.
I'll be looking out for those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, boys,
I've seen two melanistics. I've seen 7. In all my rooting around, I've seen 7 cougars in the wild. And
All you gotta do is go to Home Depot. They're running everywhere up there.
I've been screamed at a number of times, but as for actually seeing one dead on, I've only seen 3.
yeah. Well,
Boys,
I got
to run us off here, but
Yeah.
What's that?
I said
Well,
I got a few years and a few miles on you. Hang in
Well, it
there.
ain't the years, it's the mileage.
Yeah, yeah.
Ain't the years,
y'all-
the weekends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely once I've recovered, I'd like to get you back on the show, Coonbo. I'd love to hear you
Yeah.
really talk more and
Yeah.
love to chat with you. But I don't know. We'll see. I'll try to keep everybody posted how things go on Friday. I may not personally respond, but my son Noah will be keeping everybody updated, letting everybody know how it went. We're not expecting any complications, but anytime you mess with the heart, there could be. So
What you
prayers
have
are
done?
appreciated. I'm getting an internal defibrillator put in that also has a pulse generator to correct a left side bundle branch blockage.
Okay. I've had quadruple bypass surgery, and then year before last, I had 2 stents put in. So it's
I
amazing
don't
what
think
they
it's
do to
anything
the
quite
heart.
that extensive, but anytime they work with the heart, there's always that chance.
Yeah. Well, one of my best friends up here, who's a retired game warden, he just had to have in fact, he's coming up here next week or so. He's going to have the nerve bundle thing, cauterizing the nerve thing up in his top side of his heart.
Yeah.
He's got real bad AFib.
I'm hoping that this corrects the issue, and I'm back to being ornery and back out in the woods in no time at all.
Yeah,
Man, you're gonna be fine. We got too many people praying.
that's right. We're going to pray for you.
Appreciate that. I sure appreciate
God,
each and every one
God
of
is still in the miracle business.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely, positively.
Yep.
y'all, if you're the praying type, I sure would appreciate them come Friday morning.
We are.
But
Yeah.
my son Noah will keep everybody updated. He'll post it on YouTube and Facebook, and probably send out some chats to folks. I don't know how quickly I'll be responding. Depends on how because they're going to knock me out, and I maybe better part of a day before I've got my marbles unscrambled.
Mhm. Well, if they
But
give
I
you
will-
some of that, if they give you some of that Norco, and I can't remember, there's another one that they give you, you'll be having some good times after.
They're knocking me out with what they call propofol, and in the medical community, they jokingly refer to that as the milk of amnesia.
There you go.
They said it's like hitting a reset button on your brain. You wake up not knowing what happened for several hours before you went out.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with that, but I've heard of it. I mean,
I've seen people hit with it when I worked in the ER. Yeah, it's quite impressive. But we're going to start winding things down, folks. We're going to take a quick moment to thank Greg and Coonbo for coming on the show. This is the point of the show where I also like to remind people of the 22 a Day Foundation. We lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, and that is 22 too many. So if you've got friends that are first responders or law enforcement or veterans in any capacity, whether they're still active or not, check on those folks, because they've seen and had to experience some things that sometimes it's hard for them to live with. And PTSD is a horrible thing, and I can tell you that from firsthand experience.
I can tell you that from firsthand experience also.
And and the folks that you think have things wired the tightest are often the ones you got to check on the most. So let them know you're thinking about them. Let them know you care about them. Let them know they're not facing this alone. Remember, there's a phrase I like to say: "Don't let the hard days win." And if you don't have anybody else to reach out, my email address is right here on the show. You can find it, in every description of every show. It's pretty easy to remember. It's DA Roberts at daroberts.net. I'd be happy to talk with you. if you don't have anybody else. So, to reach out and like I said many times, I'd rather hear your story than read your obituary. And you don't fight these things alone, when none of us do. Fortunately, I've got a very good network of friends that I can reach out to. But we all face these things, and that's just something. Again, reach out to your first responder and veteran friends. And we've been winding up the show here lately with a toast, and it's something I'm pretty proud of. I'm glad we started doing it. So we're gonna close it out with a toast, and this is a part of a song. It's an old Irish drinking song called "The Parting Glass," and it's played at the end of the day in Irish pubs all over the world. And it's, lifting a glass to those as you part ways for the night. When we listen to the song, you listen to the lyrics. It's really about much more than that. It's about lifting a glass to those we've lost along the way. So we're going to close the show out with a toast, and the toast goes like this: "But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night, and joy be to you all." Good night, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Catch us again Wednesdays and Saturdays on Ex Machina. A special thanks to all our channel members and Patreon supporters. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe.